Have you ever wondered what happens after we die? Is there truly a light at the end of the tunnel, or is it just nothing? I used to believe that death was the end. No heaven, no hell, just darkness. But then I died, and what I experienced on the other side changed everything I thought I knew. Welcome to Eternal Bible Stories. Today, I'll share with you the story of David Bennett, a man who faced death in the middle of a raging sea. But instead of the end, he encountered the Creator of the universe, a presence of infinite wisdom and love, revealing the true purpose of life. What you're about to hear might change the way you see life, death, and everything beyond. If you believe in the power of real near-death experiences, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. And if you have your own story, share it with us at eternalbiblestories@gmail.com. Now, listen closely, because this story might just change your life forever. My name is David Bennett, and back in 1983, I was the chief engineer on a research vessel. At the time, I was young, ambitious, and, to be honest, pretty full of myself. My world revolved around my career and success, but all of that changed after one fateful night at sea. That night we were trying to bring the ship into the harbor, but the harbor master wouldn't allow it. The ocean was furious. 25 to 30-foot waves were crashing against the seawall, making entry way too dangerous. With no other choice, we anchored about 2 miles offshore, caught in the grip of an unforgiving storm. Some of the crew needed to get to shore to catch a flight to LAX, and the only way to get them there was by launching a Zodiac rubber boat. A tough little craft we often used to recover our submarines, but this time things were different. We were running with a skeleton crew since we'd been testing a new sub, and the mate assigned to drive the Zodiac wasn't familiar with the harbor. That's when the captain turned to me and said, "You're going with him. He'll need your help navigating." Without hesitation, I climbed aboard with 4 other crew members. It was pitch dark. No moonlight, no stars, just the distant glow of the harbor lights and the flashing beacon of the channel marker. The storm was still raging, and the waves were relentless, lifting us high one moment, then dropping us deep into the troughs the next. Crest a wave, scan for the harbor buoy, drop down, wait for the next chance. We kept repeating the process, riding the swells like a roller coaster in the dead of night, trying to find our way. What we didn't know was that we were heading straight into a nightmare. When I finally opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital, back in the world I had so desperately wanted to leave behind. But something was different. I wasn't just alive, I was whole. Later, the doctors told me something that should have been impossible. I had been dead for over 10 minutes. Not just unconscious, not just on the brink, but clinically, medically, completely gone. My heart had stopped. My body had shut down. My brain had been without oxygen for far too long. Long enough that I should have suffered severe brain damage, if not been left in a vegetative state. And yet, when they ran their tests, when they checked my vitals, when they looked for the inevitable consequences of my death, they found nothing. No brain damage, no cognitive impairment, no neurological issues of any kind. I was completely, entirely fine. And that wasn't even the most miraculous part. During the resuscitation process, the doctors believed I had suffered a heart attack. It made sense. After all, my blood pressure had plummeted, my pulse had disappeared, and my body had gone completely limp. They ran tests, expecting to see evidence of damage, scarring, or at the very least, signs of a cardiac event. But when the results came back, they were shocked. There was nothing. Not a single sign that my heart had ever stopped. No damage, no abnormalities, nothing to indicate that I had just gone through what should have been a fatal experience. It was as if my heart had never even skipped a beat. And then came the biggest miracle of all. The reason I had been in the hospital in the first place. The battle I had been fighting for months. The disease that had drained my body, stolen my energy, and threatened to take my life, before this night even happened. The cancer was gone, completely. Not in remission, not shrinking, not reduced, gone. The scans showed nothing, the blood work came back normal, the biopsies repeated, rechecked, verified, all confirmed the same impossible truth. There was no trace of cancer anywhere in my body. It was as if it had never existed. One doctor even told me, almost in disbelief, that if they hadn't personally seen my previous scans, they wouldn't have believed I had ever been sick at all. There were no scars, no signs of tumors, no damaged tissue, nothing. Every inch of my body was healthy, vibrant, untouched by the disease that had once threatened to take everything from me. I had come back from death, and I had come back healed. We had been searching for the harbor buoy, rising and falling with the waves, but after a while it was nowhere in sight. There was no choice but to press forward and hope for the best. Worst case, we'd make a beach landing and figure things out from there. It wasn't ideal, but it seemed like the only option. That was the last clear thought I had before everything went to hell. Out of nowhere, a massive wave rose up in front of us, towering higher than anything we had faced so far. Before we could react, the Zodiac launched off the crest like it had been catapulted into the air. For a brief moment, it felt like we were flying. Then came the inevitable drop. My instincts kicked in, and I shouted at the mate, "Turn us around, it's safer out at sea." He reacted fast, yanking the tiller to swing the boat back toward open water. But before we could reposition, another monstrous wave came crashing down with unimaginable force. The impact was devastating. The sheer power of the wave folded the Zodiac in half as if it were nothing more than a flimsy toy. The force catapulted me, sitting at the bow, straight into the raging sea. One moment I was in the boat, the next I was completely engulfed in darkness and freezing water. The cold was a shock to my system, but I didn't have time to process it. The ocean had me now, pulling me deeper, tossing me in every direction like a rag doll caught in a furious, unrelenting current. I had no sense of up or down, no control over my body. Years of experience as a commercial diver told me the worst thing I could do was fight against the chaos. Panic was a death sentence. If I tried to swim without knowing where the surface was, I'd only waste precious energy and oxygen. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I went limp and let my life vest do its job, trusting it would eventually pull me toward the surface. But even a trained diver can only hold their breath for so long. The seconds stretched unbearably, my lungs screaming for air. I knew the symptoms of oxygen deprivation all too well. First the dizziness, then the light-headed euphoria, a strange sensation of peace creeping in where panic should have been. The human brain does strange things in its final moments. Thoughts that should have been frantic or desperate were oddly detached. Well, at least my life insurance is paid up. My wife will be taken care of. It was a ridiculous thing to be thinking as I was drowning, but it didn't matter. The euphoria spread, washing over me like an anesthetic. My body had reached its limit. My lungs finally gave in, and I inhaled. Seawater flooded in, burning, searing. A brief moment of excruciating pain, and then, just like that, everything changed. There. 1 second I was drowning, trapped in the crushing grip of the ocean. The next, I was somewhere else. I had been ripped from my body, torn away from everything I had ever known. The violent sea, the raging storm, the burning in my lungs. It was all gone. There was no struggle, no fear, no cold. Just an overwhelming, indescribable stillness. It happened so fast that I barely had time to process it. One moment I was drowning, my lungs burning as seawater rushed in. The next, I was outside my body, separated from the chaos of the storm and the struggle for survival. I found myself drifting in an endless expanse of absolute darkness. But this wasn't just any darkness. It wasn't empty or frightening. Instead, it felt vast, infinite, and strangely full. It was a void, yet it contained everything. There was no sound, no movement, no reference point of any kind. And yet, I felt more at peace than I had ever been in my entire life. The bone-chilling cold of the ocean was gone. The pain in my lungs had vanished. The fear of drowning, the panic of survival, all of it simply ceased to exist. I wasn't struggling anymore. I wasn't gasping for air or fighting against the currents. Instead, I felt light, free, and completely at ease. For a brief moment, I wondered if this was it, if this was what death felt like. But instead of fear, all I felt was a deep, profound stillness. Not an empty stillness, but a welcoming one. It was as if I had stepped beyond the confines of my physical self into something much greater, much more expansive than I had ever imagined. Then, amidst the infinite blackness, I saw a light. At first, it was just a tiny glimmer, barely noticeable in the vast expanse. But as I focused on it, I felt an unexplainable pull, a gentle invitation rather than a command. Something within me knew that I needed to go toward it. As I moved, the light began to shift and change. It wasn't just a single glow. As I drew closer, I realized it was made up of millions upon millions of tiny, shimmering fragments, each radiating its own unique brilliance. They weren't static. They moved together in perfect harmony, flowing and shifting like a flock of birds in flight, changing direction in unison as if responding to an unseen rhythm. The colors were indescribable, more vibrant, more alive than anything I had ever seen. Waves of light rippled and danced, filling the space around me with an almost musical quality, as if the very fabric of existence was alive with energy. And then I felt it. A wave of love so intense, so overwhelmingly pure that it took my breath away, if I had still needed to breathe. This wasn't just the love I had known in my earthly life. It wasn't the love of family, of friends, of romance. It was bigger, deeper, and more profound than anything I could ever put into words. It was a love that knew me completely. Every thought, every memory, every mistake, every triumph, and still embraced me fully, without hesitation, without judgment. It wrapped around me like a warm embrace, filling every part of my being with a sense of belonging, of homecoming. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. I felt like I had found the place where I truly belonged. Not the physical world I had left behind, but here, in this light, in this love, in this vast and boundless presence that welcomed me without question. A realization settled deep within me, one so powerful that it left no room for doubt. I'm home. I've finally come home. The moment I merged into that sea of shimmering light, something unexpected happened. 3 distinct lights broke away from the rest and started moving toward me. There were no faces, no voices, no physical forms, just radiant, pulsing energy. And yet, somehow, I knew them. Not like you recognize an old friend or remember someone from a distant memory. This was deeper, more instinctual. It was like a part of me had always known them, like I had belonged to them all along, but had somehow forgotten. Until now. They were my soul family. The realization hit me like a tidal wave of emotion. All my life, I had struggled with feeling like I truly belonged anywhere. My childhood had been unstable, bouncing between different situations, never quite settling. My mother had tried her best, but life had been hard, and I never really experienced the kind of family that made you feel safe, loved, and completely accepted. I had always been searching for something, but I had never known what. Now, standing in front of these luminous beings, I finally understood. They were what I had been missing. The love that radiated from them was beyond anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just warmth or affection. It was complete, unconditional, overwhelming love. Love that didn't care what mistakes I had made, what regrets I carried, or what kind of person I had been on earth. It was the kind of love that saw everything, every flaw, every weakness, every insecurity, and embraced it all anyway. I didn't just feel welcomed, I felt claimed. I was home. Then, before I could even process it, more lights emerged from the vast expanse, about a dozen of them, surrounding me, their presence like a soft, glowing cocoon of acceptance. And in that moment, something even more incredible happened. We started communicating, but not with words. There was no need for talking, no need for explaining or struggling to find the right phrases. Every thought, every feeling, every understanding was shared instantly, effortlessly. It was like we were plugged into the same consciousness, where knowledge wasn't given or received. It was simply known. There was no judgment, no disappointment, no list of things I should have done differently, just love. Pure, boundless, soul-deep love. And then they gently guided me forward. Ahead of us, floating in the vastness of this ethereal realm, was something breathtaking. A massive sphere of light, pulsing and shifting like it was alive. But it wasn't just glowing, it was radiating intelligence, presence, power. I had no idea what it was, but somehow I knew it mattered. As we moved closer, a strange feeling washed over me, a deep, unshakable knowing that something big was about to happen. Then, inside the sphere, something began to take shape. At first, it was just flickers of movement, shadows of something I couldn't quite make out. But then, the images sharpened, and I recognized them. They were my memories. Every action, every choice, every moment I had ever lived, playing out before me in vivid, undeniable detail. I was about to see my life from a perspective I had never imagined. The life review had begun. I had always imagined that if something like this happened, if there really was some kind of judgment after death, it would be like watching a movie of my life, maybe seeing a highlight reel of my biggest moments, both good and bad. But this was nothing like that. I wasn't just watching my life unfold. I was feeling it. Every action I had ever taken, every word I had spoken, every choice I had made, it was all there. But instead of just reliving it from my own perspective, I experienced it from the perspective of every single person I had ever interacted with. If I had been kind, I felt the warmth that my words or actions had brought to someone else's heart. If I had hurt someone, I didn't just see their pain. I felt it as if it were happening to me. I realized in the most undeniable way possible that every moment of my life had created ripples, some spreading love, others spreading harm. When I had done something with love and genuine intention, I could see the impact radiating outward, like waves of light expanding and touching countless lives in ways I had never even imagined. But when I had acted out of ego, arrogance, or selfishness, the effect was weak, dull, or even damaging. I could feel how my careless words or dismissive attitude had discouraged someone, how a moment of anger had left a scar I never knew existed. And let me tell you, for a guy like me who had spent his younger years being pretty full of himself, this was not easy to watch. Some moments were downright painful. There were things I had said and done that I had completely forgotten about, moments that had meant nothing to me at the time, but had meant everything to the people on the receiving end. I saw how a casual insult I had thrown at someone in frustration had stayed with them for years, shaping the way they saw themselves. I saw times when I had been too self-absorbed to notice that someone was hurting, and the loneliness they had felt because of it. And the hardest part? I wasn't alone while watching all of this. My soul family was right there with me, experiencing everything right alongside me. I expected them to be disappointed, maybe even ashamed of me, but they weren't, not even for a second. They didn't judge me, they didn't scold me, they didn't look at me with any kind of condemnation. They simply loved me. They were there to help me understand, to support me, to guide me through this process, not to punish me, but to help me grow. Through their presence, I understood something deeply profound. This wasn't about guilt or shame. It was about learning, about truly understanding the impact of my existence. And as painful as some of it was also incredibly freeing, because for the first time I wasn't seeing myself through the lens of ego, ambition, or self-interest. I was seeing myself through the eyes of love. As my life review came to an end, I found myself standing before an invisible threshold. Beyond it lay something else, another realm, another dimension. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side, but I felt a deep pull, an unspoken invitation to step forward. But just as I was about to cross, everything around me shifted. The space itself seemed to transform, and suddenly a brilliant, radiant light appeared ahead of me. It wasn't just bright, it was alive, pulsing with a presence so vast, so powerful that it enveloped everything. The energy pouring from it was beyond anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just light, it was love, wisdom, creation itself. And then, from the heart of that light, a figure began to emerge. It wasn't a figure in the human sense. I couldn't make out a face, couldn't define a shape, but the presence was undeniable. It was infinite yet intimate, distant yet closer to me than my own soul. Every part of my being knew, without a doubt, this was the source, the creator of all things, the origin of existence. I had no words. My entire need to be told who this was. I already knew. I had spent my whole life questioning, seeking, wondering about what lay beyond human understanding. And now, here I was, standing in the presence of the very being who had set everything into motion. The Creator didn't need to speak. His mere presence poured knowledge into me, wrapping around me like a wave of understanding. Yet, even in the infinite vastness of his being, he felt personal. He saw me completely, not just as a man, not just as a soul, but as something he had created with purpose and love. Then I heard his voice. It wasn't a sound like we know it. It was everywhere, within me and outside of me, resonating through my very essence. It was deep, yet gentle, vast, yet personal, and with a love beyond words. He spoke, "It is not your time. You must return." Instantly I resisted. Every fiber of my being fought against the idea of leaving. No, I don't want to go back. My body is broken and life is cruel. Here I have finally found my family. Here I am loved in a way I never knew was possible. The world I left behind is full of pain, suffering, and loneliness. I don't belong there anymore. I braced myself for an argument, for some kind of divine decree that would force me back, but there was none. The Creator didn't demand, he didn't force, he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped closer. Even though I couldn't see his physical form, I could feel it, a radiant presence of pure love moving toward me. And then he touched me. I don't know how to explain it. He had no physical body, yet I felt it as clearly as if someone had laid their hand on my shoulder. Warmth, comfort, a reassurance so deep that it reached into the very core of my being. It wasn't just a touch, it was a transfer of understanding, of truth, of purpose. And then, in a voice filled with both authority and boundless love, he spoke again. "You must return, because you have a mission." The moment the word mission was spoken, something inside me shifted. In an instant, my consciousness expanded. It was as if I was connected to every soul that had ever lived and every soul that ever would live. I could see it. the intricate, interconnected design of existence. I understood in a way that words could never express that life wasn't just about individual experiences. It was about purpose, about impact, about something far greater than myself. I had work to do. I wasn't sent to Earth to just exist. I was sent to do something that only I could do. And then I felt it, a powerful force pulling me back. The light began to dim, the Creator's form slowly fading from view, but his voice remained, resonating within me, wrapping around my soul like an eternal echo. Carry my love and light back to the world. Live to share what you have learned. I barely had time to grasp what was happening before the force intensified, and in a sudden rush, I was falling back into the world I thought I had left behind. I saw my body before I felt it, still trapped beneath the wreckage of the shattered zodiac, tossed mercilessly by the relentless waves. It looked lifeless, caught in the chaotic grip of the ocean, tumbling with the debris like a rag doll. I watched from outside of it, detached, weightless, hovering above the scene. The sea no longer had control over me, and for a brief moment, I hesitated. Then, suddenly, something shifted. A loose bowline from the wrecked Zodiac floated past, and in an almost impossible moment of timing, the rope wrapped around my arm. Another towering wave crashed down, and as the water surged upward, the line tightened like a vice and yanked my body toward the surface. The force was violent. It wrenched my arm so hard that my shoulder dislocated on impact, but it dragged me back into the world of the living. I watched all of this happen from outside myself, observing with a strange sense of detachment. My body was sputtering, convulsing, struggling against the brutal sea, but I wasn't fully in it yet. I was still floating somewhere between worlds, still feeling the expansiveness of my soul, still connected to that infinite presence I had just left behind. I wasn't ready to go back. And then I had a thought. One so absurd yet so completely real in that moment. How is something as vast as me supposed to fit back into something that small? It didn't make sense. I had expanded beyond the limits of my human existence, had felt the full depth of my being, had seen the interconnectedness of all things, and now I was expected to squeeze back into that frail, broken body, into the confines of flesh and bone. It felt impossible. But before I could resist, before I could question it any further, I felt a gentle push. It was them, my soul family. They hadn't left me. They were still there, surrounding me with love, guiding me even as I was being pulled back into my earthly existence. And with that soft, final nudge, I was slammed back into my body. The moment I re-entered, it was as if the weight of the world crashed down on me all at once. The pain hit immediately, lungs burning, throat raw, muscles aching, shoulders screaming in agony. I gasped, but instead of air, I inhaled a lungful of salt water, triggering a violent fit of coughing. My chest spasmed as my body fought to expel the seawater, each convulsion feeling like it was tearing me apart. The ocean was still raging around me, trying to pull me under again. But something had changed. I wasn't just drowning anymore. I was fighting. Somewhere in the distance, through the howling wind and crashing waves, I saw it. The flicker of a flashlight. The other crew members had managed to hold on to a light, and they were searching for me. But my voice was weak, my body exhausted. I could barely keep myself afloat, let alone call out for help. Still, they found me. One of the guys swam toward me, grabbing hold of my good arm, and together we began the brutal 1-mile swim to shore. It felt endless. My limbs were numb, my breaths ragged, my strength failing with every stroke. But I knew I had to keep going. Wave after wave crashed over us, the undertow dragging at our bodies, trying to reclaim us, but somehow, against all odds, we made it. When we finally reached the shore, I collapsed onto the wet sand, barely able to move. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my mind still disoriented, half here, half there. I wasn't sure if I had fully returned, if I had truly left the other side behind, or if I was now caught somewhere in between. But one thing was clear: I was alive, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. When I finally made it to shore, I was hypothermic, in shock, and barely holding on. My shoulder and thumb were popped back into place, but the real pain wasn't physical. It was the overwhelming realization of what I had just experienced. I had died. I had left my body, traveled beyond this world, met my soul family, stood before the Creator, and been sent back for a mission I didn't understand. I tried to tell my wife, I think I died, but the fear in her eyes told me she wasn't ready to hear it. My crew? Even worse. Death was off limits in our line of work. We had to believe we were invincible. So for 11 years I kept it to myself. But no matter how much I tried to forget, 3 lessons refused to fade. 1. Acceptance. I had seen myself, the good, the bad, all of it. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to be perfect to be worthy. I could accept who I was while still striving to be better. 2. Tolerate. Everyone is on their own journey. People make choices based on where they are in life, and I had no right to judge. At the same time, I learned to accept my own circumstances, knowing that no matter where I was, I had the power to change. 3. Truth to truth. I used to only trust what I could prove, but the greatest truths aren't always physical. Real truth lives in the heart. When something is truly right, you feel it. And if you listen to that feeling, it will guide you to your purpose. Even in silence, these 3 lessons changed me. But the truth has a way of surfacing. No matter how much I tried to keep it buried, I knew one day I'd have to share my story. For 11 years, I kept my experience a secret. I buried it, lived my life, and tried to move on. But the universe had other plans. I had a second near-death experience, and this time, it wasn't just a replay of my past. It was a before and after view of my life. I saw everything again, but now I could see how much I had changed just by living the 3 lessons I had learned on the other side. I no longer doubted the existence of my soul family, the loving, guiding presence that had welcomed me home. They were still with me, communicating through unexpected intuition, sudden insights, and a deep knowing that came from beyond this world. Some people call them angels, spirit guides. I don't get caught up in labels. All I know is this: I was never alone, and neither are you. In the year 2000, life threw me another test. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung and bone cancer. The disease had eaten away 2 vertebrae in my spine, causing it to collapse, and the cancer had already spread to my brain, my kidneys, my hip. The doctors gave me no hope. There was no treatment plan, no miracle cure, just pain management to get me through my final days. But something inside me refused to accept that this was the end. In the midst of my illness, I had another profound spiritual experience. One that reignited everything I had learned from my near-death encounters. This time, I saw the impact I had made on others, the lives I had touched, the people I had helped, some of them in ways I never even realized. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't done yet. I made a decision. Instead of surrendering, I chose to fight. Not just with conventional medicine, but by integrating holistic healing, energy work, and deep spiritual practice. Something awakened within me during this journey, a gift, an ability to facilitate healing within myself. And it worked. Against all odds, my body began to recover. I survived. And I knew my survival wasn't just for me, it was for others. The healing that saved me wasn't just meant to keep me alive, it was meant to be shared. And that became my final mission, to help others heal, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and in ways far beyond what the human mind can comprehend. So, what do I want you to take away from all of this? First, you are not just a body. None of us are. We are eternal beings of light, each a fragment of something far greater, connected to every soul that has ever existed. Second, this life is a school. We are here to learn, to grow, to love, and to help one another. Every challenge, every joy, every heartbreak, it's all part of the lesson. And most importantly, there is nothing to fear about death. When our time here is done, we don't vanish into nothingness. We go home, to a place of love, light, and absolute belonging. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you remember this. Every act of kindness, every moment of love, ripples through the universe in ways you can't yet see. But one day, when you return home, you'll see it all. And you'll know that every bit of love you gave mattered.